What do you think of people who claim they've been abducted by aliens? I promise, that's not a rhetorical question. It's very relevant for the story I'm about to tell. Because, well, I won't bother beating around the bush. I have been abducted by aliens. I have been taken aboard alien spacecrafts against my will and subjected to all sorts of experiments. I know I'm not the first person to make that claim. Hell, I'm not even the 100th. But my story is different, I promise. And I'm sharing this story knowing that most people won't believe me. Plenty will even call me crazy, stupid, or some tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorist. But I still need to put my story out there. I don't care what random strangers on the internet think. I don't care what an army of therapists and psychiatrists think. I am not crazy. I know what I experienced was real. Sure, that's a common refrain from a lot of people who claim they've been abducted by aliens. But trust me, none of them have the perspective that I have. Now, that's not me boasting or anything. I'm sorry. I'm a little overwhelmed here. I still don't know how to put into words what happened to me, let alone why it happened. I guess the best way to start is to establish a few important insights. Because there's a specific context to my alien abduction experience, one that offers an important contrast to others like it. You see, most of the people who report being abducted by aliens, the one that involves bright lights, missing time, and gray-skinned aliens, those never happened. That I can say with certainty. Now, that's not to say that the people who tell those stories are crazy. They're not even lying. They probably believe in their heart of hearts that what happened to them was real. But in reality, it's just a nasty case of sleep paralysis. That's the most common explanation that skeptics give when discounting testimony from alien abductees. And yeah, that is a real thing. Sleep paralysis, this weird state where you're dreaming, you can't move, but you're completely unaware of your surroundings, that does explain a lot of alien abduction experiences, and most paranormal experiences in general. But within that same explanation, there are other relevant questions that aren't often asked. Like, why the hell does sleep paralysis exist in the first place? Why is it so common across people, places, and cultures? And why does it manifest like this, with aliens, abductions, and strange bodily experiments? Keep all those questions in mind, because they're an important part of my story. That story actually begins before I ever had an abduction experience. When I was young, around 8 years old to be exact, I found out I had a brain tumor. And it was serious, more than enough to cause my mother to burst into tears when the doctor told us. But at the same time, I was also lucky. The doctors caught it so early that it only required a minor procedure to remove. It was still scary to me, but probably much more so for my parents. I didn't feel inclined to ask questions. I honestly just preferred not to think too much about it, mostly because I wanted it to be over. And honestly, I barely even remember the surgery. I didn't even need that long to recover. There was a stretch where I had headaches, dizziness, blurred vision, and nausea, but for the most part, I was back to normal in a couple of months. However, there was one lingering side effect that persisted long after the surgery. I didn't have any dreams. Nothing vague or vivid, nothing good or bad, not even mild nightmares. I just stopped dreaming altogether. Now, that didn't affect my sleep. I still slept as soundly as always. But the strange quirk, which I wasn't even aware of until much later in life, it proved instrumental when that fateful day came. The day of my first alien abduction. And yes, by first, I mean the first of many. The way it played out was similar to a lot of alien abduction experiences. I was lying in my bed, fast asleep. Then I wake up and feel some sort of presence in my room, and then I look up to see this figure looming over me. Then there's this flash of white light, and the next thing I know, I'm lifted out of my bed, and then I'm transported into some strange ship. I don't know how. One minute I'm in one place, the next I'm somewhere else entirely. Somewhere that doesn't feel like anywhere else on Earth. I eventually find myself lying on some sort of examination table, and all these weird figures hanging over me. But it's here where things really diverge from your standard alien abduction experience. For one, I'm never stripped naked or anything. I'm still wearing the same dirty socks and boxer briefs that I put on that same night. And second, I'm not the only abductee there. While I'm lying on this table, I realize I'm in a much bigger space than I thought. It felt like less an examination room and more a gymnasium of sorts, one with rows and rows of beds, each occupied by another person. The people there all varied in terms of age, race, physique, and whatnot. Near as I can tell, they appear to be from all over the world. I'm still not entirely sure, but they were all lying perfectly still, mostly still in sleeping attire, and not at all aware of what's going on around them. As for what was happening, well, this is where I get a little squeamish. Because those figures hovering around me in the other beds, they are not your classic gray-skinned, big-eyed aliens. They're not reptilian or bug-like either. They're some kind of robot creature, for lack of a better word. They're not metal. They're not flesh either. I still don't know what the hell they are. They're just these big, hulking bodies, each with arms so powerful they look like tree trunks. Near as I could tell, they didn't have faces. But trust me, you can feel them looking at you. You can feel it in the very pit of your soul. Their only job seemed to be holding you down, strapping you in with some kind of restraints, and sticking you with this big silvery syringe. Trust me, if you hate needles, this is your worst nightmare. Now, I don't care for needles either, but when that thing entered my neck, I swear, I thought I was going to die. And it's here where my situation became more unique. Because, unlike every other human on this ship, I resisted. I squirmed and I struggled. I even managed to yell out something. I don't remember what, but it startles the figures hovering over me, as though they're not used to it at all. They still manage to hold me down. Then I hear this commotion in the background. I didn't know what or who it was at the time, but I felt their shadow cast over me. But before I could get a look, everything started to fade, like I'd been hit with some potent sedative. And just before I passed out, I heard this distinct, non-human voice in my head.
This human is a problem.
I woke up in my bed the next morning, same time as always. But I still remembered everything that happened. I remembered it so clearly and vividly. That isn't normal, more so than I thought at the time. I distinctly remember checking my room, looking in a mirror, mostly around the ejection site. But near as I could tell, nothing was out of place. My room was fine. My body was fine. At first, I thought it was a dream, a very vivid dream. Now, remember, I'm a teenager at the time. I didn't know then that I was incapable of dreaming, but that seemed like the most logical explanation at the time. So I tried to write it off, and I tried to just get on with my life. Then, a few months later, it happened again. It played out exactly the same as before, so much so that I think I ended up in the same bed on the same ship. This time, I just closed my eyes and kept trying to wake myself up. At one point, I tried to pinch myself, but I couldn't. Those alien robots I mentioned earlier kept holding me down. And then that same voice I heard before, I heard it again in my head.
This one is different. We must proceed carefully.
I passed out again. Then I woke up in my bed and I'm a complete mess. Once was a fluke. Twice was the start of a pattern. And if it kept happening, well, the possibilities just kept getting more and more disturbing. And it's here where I also start developing some serious personal issues. I became distant from others. Paranoid, erratic, moody, and untrusting to a fault. It got so bad that I couldn't even trust my own memories. On more than one occasion, I locked myself in my closet and refused to come out. I'm pretty sure my parents almost had me committed a few times. But somehow, I still managed to graduate school. I didn't go to college, but I did manage to land a job with some contractors. I found that if I just kept myself busy, if I distracted myself with work and whatnot, I didn't think about it. For a while, it seemed as though it was over. The abductions, they stopped. But then, they started happening again. And this time, they happened much more frequently. They weren't as vivid as before. I only got a few blurry recollections here and there. But I still recognize the alien robots. And that voice in my head, I recognize that too. I didn't always hear it, but when it came through, my God, I couldn't forget it if I tried. And most of what it said often boiled down to this.
This human is different, but valuable. Very, very valuable.
After a while, I just couldn't keep ignoring it. I ended up going to a few doctors and more than a few therapists. But every doctor told me the same thing. Physically, I was fine. There was no reason why I should be having night terrors. Now, the therapist said I might have had some unresolved trauma from my surgery, which I tried to talk out. I even went on some medication for a while. But it wasn't until I went to a neurologist that I learned something that made everything worse. That doctor, he was the one who revealed from a brain scan that I shouldn't be able to dream. Something about some section of my brain that had been damaged from the tumor I had as a kid. I honestly don't know the medical jargon, but he just flat out told me that I should not be able to dream, let alone remember them. Now, when he told me that, I almost threw up, because if what he was saying was real, then that meant those experiences I had, they weren't dreams. They were real. Of course I didn't tell him that. I somehow kept my composure long enough to ask for a second opinion. Eventually, 2 other doctors confirmed it. Whether it was because of the tumor or the surgery that removed it, my brain just wasn't wired to dream. That raised a lot of very disturbing questions. And for a while, I was too afraid to contemplate the answers. So I started drinking heavily. I started taking sleeping pills. I would even sleep with a gun under my pillow, as if that would give me a chance against these advanced aliens. I was in a very dark place for a while. I was afraid to go to sleep. Somehow I knew it was going to happen again. I didn't know when. I just knew in my gut that those aliens would come back. I tried connecting with others who claimed to have been abducted, but I quickly learned that most of them were either lying, trolling, or just completely deluded. Still won't say it was a complete waste of time. This one person on a forum, whose real name I never learned, encouraged me to confront the aliens. If this was really happening to me, I should try and learn why. Try and ask them for something, anything. It sounded risky, possibly stupid even, but it made the most sense out of all the crazy shit I'd read. And eventually, I got my chance. Because when the aliens came again, I was ready. It happened on a night when I was totally sober and took no sleeping pills. I kept myself clean and clear. And when I finally felt that familiar presence again, that distinct alien presence, I confronted it. Not with my fists, not with a weapon, not even with my voice. I just yelled with my mind, hoping to get a response. I still don't know exactly what I said, but the response I got was unexpected and plenty disturbing.
I was afraid of this. Your value has suddenly become a problem.
It wasn't threatening. It wasn't very friendly either. If anything, it sounded exasperated. I remember getting up from my bed and looking towards the presence. And then, through the darkness of the night, I saw it. The alien figure that always hovered over the robots. I can't quite put into words what it looked like. It definitely wasn't human. I don't even know if it had a gender. I also don't know if it was flesh or machine. But it still stood over me, like a titan over an ant. And all I could do was just look at what I thought was its face and let my mind do the talking. I may or may not have cussed it out, but the alien, it never flinched. It just kept looking at me with this strange scrutiny, and it kept talking to me through its mind.
Be calm. I'm conversing with your mind directly. But I'm afraid this will be the last time we connect. Your brain, your obviously flawed flesh, it has undermined our safeguards. We cannot wipe your memory. We cannot induce sleep paralysis. You are apparently incapable of undergoing such procedures.
That comment did answer some burning questions. I now knew why no one else had a similar abduction experience. And if they did, they could somehow attribute it to sleep paralysis. Honestly, when you think about it, that's kind of brilliant. Even if some people were vaguely aware of being abducted, they had this built-in mechanism that could be used to write it off. Oh God, I wish I had that luxury. I really, really would have preferred it to the actual truth.
This is disappointing. It means we can no longer effectively harvest your inner biome. Yours was of a unique quality. Finding another like you will be tedious, but we will manage.
That answered another question, and it somehow made me sicker. Those needles they kept sticking me with, they were real, and they were extracting something. That seemed to be true for everyone else I saw on the ship. Part of me didn't want to know why, but the other part of me, well, that's the part the creature sensed.
Do not concern yourself. We only took what has always been produced by you humans, what we engineered you to produce. Your bodies are indeed an evolutionary mess, but they are capable of producing incredibly rich biome, a rare and precious commodity throughout the galaxy. What we use it for, you need not know. Just understand that it is rare and difficult to synthesize. But certain species, with a few subtle tweaks to their DNA...
I honestly didn't want to hear the rest. I already felt like I'd just learned something no human should learn. If this alien was telling the truth, then humanity as we knew it, every man, woman, and child who ever lived, they only existed as some form of livestock. Some creatures meant to produce some sort of goop for a bunch of aliens. Suddenly, I felt like a caged animal, one who was just seeing the walls of his cage for the very first time. I swear, I wanted to leap out of my own skin. I even wanted to attack the alien, but somehow it paralyzed me. Maybe I was just in shock, but I swear, this thing did something that froze my body, or at least the parts of my brain that controlled it. Then the alien moved in closer. I didn't see any anger, I just saw frustration, and maybe a bit of pity. At that very moment, I knew this was the last time I would ever see this creature. It probably knew that too. But its final words to me, the final, terrible truth about who these aliens were and what they were doing, they will always haunt me.
you are an anomaly, hopefully one of exceeding rarity, because we cannot afford to undermine the continued harvest. It is difficult enough evading detection from your primitive tools, but human biome is in such high demand. We will continue harvesting it as we have for thousands upon thousands of Earth years. But if at some point others remember, if ever there comes a time when they become aware of their servile state in this galaxy, well, that will be a much larger problem, one with a very messy solution.